When the ones you call family are the first to push you off the edge, will you let go or rise up and drag them down with you? The wind howled over the rooftops of Doingoy Town, where winter never arrived gently. Snow had fallen for 3 consecutive days, and on that fateful night, the temperature dropped below minus 18 degrees. People said it was the harshest blizzard in 30 years. When Vin, 34 years old, a mechanical engineer, stood in front of his own house, his shoes sinking deep into the snow, gloves soaked, breath turning into white mist. He shivered not only from the cold, but also from another kind of numbness, betrayal. Through the misty glass, he saw Lou, his wife of 6 years, sitting with her parents and younger brother, warm by the fireplace. They were laughing. That laughter, though muffled by thick glass and swirling snow, still pierced Vin's chest like blades. He knocked on the door. Not hard, but enough to draw attention. The porch light flicked on. Lou stepped out, standing behind the glass door, not opening it. She showed no sign of worry or panic. Instead, there was a slight, almost mocking smile. "You're late," she said evenly through the phone. "We've changed the locks." "Changed the locks? Are you kidding me? There's a blizzard out here. Open the door." She shrugged, as if it had nothing to do with her. Behind her, her brother Dung raised a beer can, laughing loudly. Family gathering tonight. No place for outsiders. Vin said nothing. He just looked into his wife's eyes, hoping to see a flicker of hesitation, a hint of compassion. But no, she turned away, as casually as closing a refrigerator door. He stood there a while longer, until his phone died. The wind pierced through his coat, and despair welled up into tears. And then he walked away. Vin drove in silence, his hands frozen on the steering wheel. Snow kept falling, tiny flakes like salt scraping against the windshield. The world outside was a blur of white, streetlights casting pale, yellow glows on layers of ice. He didn't know where he was going. No destination, no plan. Only one thing drove him: to leave that house, the place he once called home. 15 minutes later, his car slid down a small slope and stopped in front of a 24-hour diner. The neon sign was faded. Chuan Jeongang. Probably the only place still lit in the stormy night. He stepped inside, the doorbell jingling, drawing indifferent glances from a few people. A dozing driver with a cup of tea, a young waitress yawning behind the counter. "Hello, what would you like?" the girl asked, her voice hoarse with sleep. "Black coffee." "Huh. Very hot." She nodded and turned away. Vin chose a secluded corner by the window, where he could watch the endless falling snow. He removed his gloves, his hands trembling, not from the cold anymore, but from the dizziness spreading through his mind. He pulled out his phone. The screen was black. Dead long ago. For a moment, he felt like he didn't exist. No one knew where he was, no one waiting for him. The coffee was placed before him. The familiar aroma made his chest tighten. He looked at the waitress, a young girl with hastily tied hair, a thick coat covered in road dust. She asked nothing, just left a napkin and walked away. In that moment, images flooded his mind. Lou's mocking smile, Dung's words through the glass, the cold, indifferent eyes of his in-laws. Each detail like a nail driven into his heart. He took a sip of coffee, quietly thinking, is this the beginning or the end? And in that moment, he knew a part of him could never return. The next morning, the snow had not stopped falling, but the sky was a bit brighter. Chuan Jeongang was quiet. Vin left his seat when the wall clock struck just past 8. He had nowhere to go, but he no longer wanted to linger in that cold cafe. He walked to his car, thinking he would find a nearby gas station to charge his phone, when he suddenly remembered someone, Lam, an old college friend and later a colleague during a short-term project a few years back. They had long lost contact, but Lam had once said, "If you ever need a place to disappear for a few days, I have a spare room in the suburbs." With no better option, Vin took a chance and drove south, towards the scattered residential areas outside town. On the way, he stopped at a small convenience store, asked around, and luckily, someone remembered Lam's address, a gray wooden house at the end of a street called Banglang. When Vin arrived, Lam was shoveling snow from a porch. A thin man with a calm demeanor. He looked up, initially surprised, then broke into a sincere smile. Good heavens, Vin! You crawl up from the ground, or what? Come in, it's freezing. Vin nodded without a word. Only when he stepped into the warm kitchen, smelling instant noodles and tea, did he sigh, for the first time in 2 whole days. Lamb didn't press him. He simply poured tea, then placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. You don't need to talk right away. Here, silence is allowed. They sat like that for quite a while. Then, when Vin began to speak, not in anger, but in a whisper like dust being swept from his chest, Lamb listened quietly. No judgment, no interruption. When the story ended, Lamb stayed silent for a few minutes. Then he stood up, opened a drawer, and took out an old phone. Use this for now. I kept it for an alarm clock, but you need it more than I do. Also, come with me to the woodshop tomorrow. Help out for a few days to clear your head. Vin took the phone, slowly nodded. He knew that from this moment on, he was no longer completely alone. Lamb's woodshop was deep in a small valley, over 20 kilometers from the town. Surrounded by pine forests, the air was crisp, filled with the scent of sap and morning mist. When Vin arrived with Lamb, it was still dim outside. He felt something different, a raw peace, wordless but deeply real. Only 3 of us here, Lamb said, leading Vin inside. Master Hoa, the owner, me, and now you. No one talks much. Everyone's got their own scars. Master Hoa was an older man, silver-bearded with deep-set eyes like someone. Days passed, and Vin gradually adapted to the rhythm of the woodshop. His body still ached, but now the pain felt comforting, a tangible ache so different from the invisible weariness of living with Lou's family. One gray afternoon, while arranging freshly cut planks, Vin's hand slipped. A long board tilted, its sharp edge slicing across the back of his hand. Blood spurted instantly, dark red against his pale, sawdust-covered skin. Let me see. Lamb rushed over, wrapping his hand in a cloth before leading him to a small restroom in the back. It's not deep. Lucky it missed the tendon, Lamb said, his voice calm but gentle. Sitting on the wooden chair, watching the blood seep through the dirty fabric, Vin suddenly noticed his hands, calloused, bloodied, covered in dust and sweat. His fingers, darkened and rough, no longer those of a tidy, orderly engineer. But strangely, he felt proud. In those hands were labor, real pain, real life, untouched by mockery, unchallenged by anyone. Every scratch was a declaration, I exist by my own hands. That night, he sat alone in the backyard beneath the wooden eaves. Lamb was asleep. Master Hoa had turned off his lights. The air was still cold, but he no longer felt chilled. A cup of hot tea sat on the table, and in his mind came the first clear thought since being cast out. He would not return. Never. And in that very moment, a small chime rang. The sound of a message arriving on the old phone Lamb had given him. Vin opened it. Zinda, El. Message. I just want to know, are you still alive? Vin read it, but didn't reply. He looked down at his dirty hands, one with dried blood clinging to the edge of his nail. Then he deleted the message, not out of hatred, but because he was learning to live without needing anyone to grant him worth. 3 days after Lou's message, Vin received a call from an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but instinct made him raise the phone. Anh Ving? This is Phuong, Lou's old friend. I know I probably shouldn't call, but you need to know something. Phuong. The name echoed like a faint bell in his memory. She had been Lou's close friend in university, occasionally joining their family dinners. Vin remembered her as quiet, observant. What is it? He asked, wary. Phuong hesitated, then spoke bluntly. I'm sorry if I'm crossing a line, but Lou and her family, they've planned to push you out of her life for a long time. I heard her tell her mother that you lack ambition and are too soft to lead a family. Each word fell into Vin's ear like heavy stones. But what truly chilled him was when Phuong continued. That night, when you were locked out during the blizzard, it wasn't accidental. I overheard a recording her mother sent to her aunt, saying, let's see how he handles knowing his true place. They wanted you to leave on your own, and if not, they'd force you to. Vin was silent for a long time. The wind outside seemed to cut straight through his chest. Thank you for telling me. I'm fine. Much better now. Fuang exhaled softly on the other end. If you need any documents or evidence, I have them. I stayed silent too long. I used to think Lu was just influenced by her family, but I see now she chose this. Willingly. After the call, Vin sat for hours before the workshop's fire, saying nothing. In his hands was a small notebook, where he began jotting down fragments of his memories, from their early marriage nights to Lu's glances when he came home late from overtime. Each page was a cut, and the more he wrote, the clearer it became. The deepest wound wasn't that snowy night. It was every day of being belittled, every nod of concession, every time he abandoned himself to preserve something that no longer existed. When he finally looked up, his eyes were dry. He no longer felt pain, only resolve. The next day, Vin woke earlier than usual. The sky was still dim, mist veiling the window pane. He put on his coat and stepped into the backyard, where the pile of firewood still smoldered from the night before. The cold seeped through his collar, but he didn't shiver. Inside him now burned a clear, steady flame. He texted Fuang, "Can we meet? I want to hear that recording." Fuang agreed, and they arranged to meet at a small cafe in the center of town. Vin arrived early, sitting in the farthest corner, his gaze calm like a windless lake. Fuang brought a USB drive. She placed it on the table, her hand slightly trembling. "I don't want to keep this anymore. It makes me feel guilty, but I'm also scared of getting involved. You did the right thing. No one deserves to stay silent forever." Vin returned to the workshop, opened the old laptop Lam had lent him, and put on headphones. A woman's voice echoed, clear, every word distinct. "Don't open the door. Let him see he's not the center. Let's see how long he lasts. Things that come easy are never valued." Vin removed the headphones. A different kind of silence fell. Not anger, just an emptiness, as if he were watching a stage where he once played the lead in a tragedy scripted by others. That night, he sent Lu an email titled, "The Truth Has Its Own Voice." No message body, just the audio file attached. 3 hours later, she called. Vin didn't answer. Instead, he typed a message. "We will talk, but not to hold on, to end it." Then he began gathering legal documents, asking Lam to recommend a trustworthy lawyer. There was no hesitation now, no hope for change from someone who no longer belonged in his journey. One day, when everything was ready, he would step into that old house, not to return, but to close a door that had been hollow for a long time. The wind still blew bitterly through the familiar streets of Doing Goi as Vin parked in front of the house that was once his home. It looked the same, dark red-tiled roof, the small window where he used to watch Lam make tea every morning. But today it was nothing more than an empty shell, filled with memories turned to thorns. He stepped out of the car, gripping the divorce papers and a copy of the recording. Documents that weren't just formalities, but a final affirmation that he had chosen his path. The door opened before he could ring the bell. Lu stood there, no longer with her usual arrogance, nor her meticulous makeup. Just a pale face, eyes red from sleepless nights or unanswered calls. "Come in." Her voice trembled, as if she didn't know where to begin. Vin entered, each step echoing through the once familiar but now foreign house. He didn't sit on the sofa like he used to. He stood tall, placed the documents on the table, and looked straight at Lu. Not with love or pain, but with resolve. "I didn't come to hear your explanations," Vin began, his voice calm like a frozen lake. "We both know what the truth is." Lu clenched her fists, lips quivering, but in the end, she offered no excuses. She knew words were meaningless now. "I want you to sign this." Vin pushed the papers toward her. No disputes, no delays. Lu looked down at the papers, tears falling, but she didn't wipe them away. She picked up the pen, hands shaking, each stroke carving the truth she had sacrificed too much to realize. When the final signature was done, Vin gathered the documents, carefully placing them in his bag. He stood, ready to leave. But before crossing the threshold, he paused. "There's one thing I want you to know." He turned back, his gaze no longer cold, but serene after a long storm. "I don't hate you anymore, because I understand some people aren't meant to walk together to the end. I just regret that we didn't have the courage to let go sooner." Lu broke down in tears, but Vin never looked back again. He stepped out of that house, as if stepping out of the darkest days of his life. The Doingoi sky was still cold, but within him a new spring was quietly blooming. Months later, Vin officially completed all legal procedures. He didn't return to the woodshop immediately, but decided to travel farther, to lands he had never imagined before. He sent Lam a postcard with only a few words. "Thank you for giving me a place to start again. If you ever need a friend, just call. I'm still living, truly living." And then, Vin left, not to escape, but to find himself, on nameless roads, through unfamiliar towns, where every sunrise reminded him. The past might leave scars, but it does not define a person's final story. Vin's story didn't end at any destination, because sometimes the most beautiful thing isn't where you arrive, but the journey where you learn to love freedom and yourself after all the ruins. The wind still blew, but this time it was no longer the chilling wind of Snowstorm night. It was the breeze of new beginnings. On a windy coastal road in central Vietnam, there stood a modest wooden workshop with a simple sign hanging in front. Sung Jal Mai, New Win Wusop. The locals had grown familiar with the tall, slender man, sun-kissed skin, calloused hands, and eyes that always held a strange calmness. That man was Nguyen Vin, no longer a mechanical engineer, nor a lost soul in the blizzards of Doi Ngoy. Now Vin lived by craftsmanship, woodworking, building small boats, repairing whatever people brought to him. Every piece he created carried the mark of patience and quiet strength, like the man himself after life's storms. Some afternoons, when the sea breeze swept in, he would sit on the porch, holding a cup of tea, gazing at the horizon where the sky met the waves. People often said he was the man who listens to the wind. For though Vin spoke little, anyone who came to him, whether to fix a broken chair or order a handmade cabinet, left feeling lighter, as if they had shed something heavy within. One day, while Vin was sawing planks for a fishing boat, a young woman appeared. She carried sketches of a small cafe she dreamed of building by the sea. "I heard, you don't just work with wood, but help people tell their stories through each piece," she said, smiling with hope in her eyes. Vin looked at the drawings, then raised his head, a rare, gentle smile forming. "What story do you want to tell?" The girl hesitated, then softly replied, "I want to create a place where anyone who steps in feels like they can start over." Vin was silent, a familiar emotion stirring within. He remembered the days in the old woodshop, remembered Lam, Master Hoa, and himself, piecing together the fragments of his life. "I understand that feeling," he said, his voice warm like the sea breeze. "Then, let's build that place together." Time passed, and a little cafe named Koing Nguyen, Origin, took shape beside Vin's workshop. Every table, every window frame was crafted by his hands, from seemingly lifeless wood, yet infused with stories of rebirth. People began to gather, not just for coffee or wooden crafts, but to find a bit of peace amidst the chaos of life. On late afternoons, when the sunset bathed the sea in crimson light, Vin often sat in his familiar corner, watching people come and go. Sometimes he overheard stories about faraway Doi Ngoy, where Lu had remarried, her family still living as they always desired. Prosperous, outwardly glamorous, but lacking sincerity. Vin didn't care. He knew the past was a closed chapter. What mattered was that he was living a simple but fulfilling life. One evening, when the sea breeze blew stronger than usual, the young cafe owner asked him, "Chu Vin, if someone asked you how to overcome the worst things, what would you say?" Vin looked at her, his gaze deep like the ocean at night. "Don't try to forget, and don't seek revenge. Just keep moving forward, and each day, do something truly meaningful for yourself." He lifted his head, listening to the steady rhythm of the waves, then added, "Because in the end, what saves us isn't forgetting the pain, but learning to live better because of those wounds." The girl smiled, nodding as if realizing something profound. And Vin stood up, returning to his workshop, where the scent of pine and fresh wood awaited, ready to be shaped into new stories. His journey continued. No more storms. No more long, freezing nights. just a simple man with calloused hands and a heart that had learned to forgive the world and himself. A peaceful summer drifted by on the windy coast. Life at Saint-Jean-Moi flowed quietly, like waves lapping the shore. Never loud, never hurried, but never stopping. But then, on an August afternoon, a strange letter arrived at the workshop.